Hello and welcome to the easternKicks podcast, a regular magazine programme about East Asian film led by me, Andrew Heskins, founder and grandmaster of easternKicks.com, and James Mudge, our leading writer.
Hey-o.
Each episode we'll be taking a look at the latest films, news and festivals, often chatting to filmmakers and stars along the way. Hello again and welcome to our latest show, a special episode focusing on a favourite of mine, James, and Hong Kong film fans everywhere, The Bride with White Hair. This time we're joined by author, film lecturer and easternKicks contributor Colette Bauman.
Hi, Colette.
We'll also hear from the last of our Udine Far East Film Festival campus correspondents.
Cool.
But first, let's get on to that important question. What are you drinking this episode, James?
I'm going to absolutely shock you. For the first time in the history of easternKicks podcast, I'm not drinking liquor or wine. I have gone for a beer today. And it's actually a grapefruit IPA. It's a William Brothers Rubus grapefruit IPA, which is coming in at like about 5.7%. So robust, and it's actually quite refreshing. And yourself?
Oh, it's lovely. I'm back with our unofficial non-sponsors, Howling Hops, and I've got a can of Rooftops.
Ooh.
It's a New England triple IPA.
Triple, wow.
Or they call it a net IPA on there, and I was wondering if it was one of their typos, because they do a lot of typos. And it's a 9.5%. So,
okay, that is very...
We're going to have to keep this podcast short, because I'm going to be a mess by about half an hour.
Well, it's not a bad thing.
And how about you, Colette? Have you got anything exciting?
Yeah, mine's alcohol-free. So it's Koppenberg Premium Cider Mixed Fruit.
Fair enough.
That'll be fine.
一號，你要記住，正與邪係水火不相容嘅。
因人依家魔教響關外勢力日漸強大，
我哋嘅種會化出師，消滅咗大批囚教。
你老人家身為八派16路盟主，都好應該出翻一分力啊！
So on to the main chat. The Bride with White Hair was released on Blu-ray this month from a 4K restoration by Eureka Entertainment. And it's as part of their Eureka Classics range. And I have to say, I'm not quite sure how they pick what titles go into what range. So this wasn't one of the Masters of Cinema. This is their Eureka Classics. And sometimes it's like...
Maybe that's a reflection on Ronnie Yu. He's not a master of cinema. Or is it the film that's the master?
See, that's the question. It was originally released on the 26th of August 1993, directed by Ronnie Yu, starring Brigitte and Leslie Cheung. Despite coming at what was really the tail end of that early 90s explosion of so-called waifu wuxia, it was hugely successful with Hong Kong audiences, but also interestingly, it's very popular internationally as well. And it's based on a long-running serialized novel by 20th century martial arts writer Liang Yuxiang, Befa Mono Chuan, apologies for my pronunciation, which literally translates as the white-haired witch. And of course it wasn't by any means the first adaptation of the story. I mean, the original serialized novel was in the late 50s, and I think within a year it had spawned a 3-part Hong Kong movie from 1959. Then it got there've been other versions, and please chip in if you've got other versions between. But you know, there's the and he's I think in all cases the actual Chinese title is the same as the original novel, or pretty much all of them. But there was in Hong Kong in 1980 there was White Haired Devil Lady, which is quite a beautiful looking film, but quite static. In Taiwan there was Wolf Devil Woman. From 1982, which seems to kind of follow the late 70s, early 80s Lady of Vengeance kind of Taiwanese exploitation movies. There's actually a lot of gore in it, from what I've seen. Then there's, and this list will not be by any means inclusive of absolutely everything that was going out there, but in 1986 there was a TV series in Hong Kong called The Romance of the White Hair Maiden, which had Amy Yip in a minor role for a few episodes.
Very nice.
So, I mean, it was a story that there'd been a lot of versions of, and it was quite familiar to particularly in audiences in Hong Kong, but I think across, into Taiwan as well. But I think we all agree we are massive fans of the film. We all love it to bits, and it's what was it that made it quite so special? What was the take that made it so?
I mean, it was one of the first ones I would have seen. Not as early as 1993, but when it was the old Tartan, I guess, DVD of it, which would have come out over here in the UK. So I caught up with it a few years later when I'd already seen obviously stuff like Zoo Warriors, whatnot, and everything. So I think first time, I loved it first time I saw it, but it was probably a little bit after that I realized it was a more recent one than some of those older ones, which I might maybe would have associated still with and everything. So it is quite a different film to those, and I guess we'll get more into it, how much of that is down to like Ronnie Yu as a director and his kind of take on the material and everything. But partly as well just the cast, just a Brigitte Lin, Leslie Cheung. It's iconic film in so many different ways. You can see why it's kind of remained a favorite with so many of us.
Because I guess part of it is that he even from the original Hong Kong film from 1959 where there was a trio of films to tell the story. I think part of it is that he really hones down on that story and the amount of characters that are discussed. That's one of the strengths, and just takes it to a real core of the story. And we should kind of talk about the way that he adapts the story, because he really turns it into a. I know that there are actually, like most martial arts novels, there are multiples of characters, and,
warring clans,
warring clans, and he keeps the warring clan part of it, and I think you do see some of those characters, but whereas even in the 90s wuxia, you get the idea that somebody may appear on screen for a couple of minutes, but there'll be often they would be introduced by a little bit of text on the screen, so you know how important they were to the story, even though they're only there for 5 seconds. He really simplifies it down to it being a Romeo and Juliet story. These two lovers, or two people who become lovers from completely different clans, or completely opposite sides of that that battle, and turns it into a Romeo and Juliet. And exploits the kind of which I think is part of the story, that there is a misunderstanding that kind of breaks them up when actually they're just on the cusp of just leaving behind the whole martial art wuxia life, without making any spoilers, but I'm sure there's a lot of listeners to this who probably well aware.
I don't think it's a spoiler situation, but no, I totally agree. There's so many great films from that kind of genre in the time, but some of them are pretty hard to follow. As you say, you have so many characters flashing up on screen, and I used to think it was maybe a subtitles thing, and I was just too slow reading it. But no, it's just you take a massive text and you pack it into like an hour and a half or less, and you're going to lose so much detail. And he, as you say, like he really, it's not even that. So simplifies always sounds like damning with faint praise, but he really sort of gets to the essence of that sort of Shakespearean story to it, and it had the alternate Cantonese title, which was like Jiang Hu, Between Love and Glory, and it sort of boils down to that kind of choice between like love and duty, I guess, to your clan, to your to your Wu-Tang clan, everything, which is great. But absolutely, I think that's the key thing about it, because otherwise,
we should explain. We should explain one of the clans. As it's translated variously is the Wu-Tang clan. It's translated in a slightly different way on various subtitles.
Yeah, it does depend which one you're watching, but I think that's a key thing, because a lot of sort of casual martial arts fans, or somebody who might say they maybe enjoy a couple of key ones like Zoo Warriors, Mr. Vampire, and something like that. Some of the more dense ones, you probably put them off. But the way he did this, everything that, it's still pretty accessible. Everything that, it's pretty efficient as well. The story, it's. We'll talk about the film more. It's not the fastest moving film, but the story itself is very focused, which is nice.
But I think if we're going to talk about the approach, I think it's interesting that I believe that Ronnie Yao was not, because actually a lot of his life he was brought up in the States. He wasn't. He was one person who wasn't massively aware of the story, even though everybody around him was working with. That was, but his take on it. I mean, we talk about it finding an international audience, but also that he was very much focused on the film getting an international audience. I mean, you can kind of see that his approach is, and then actually, I think throughout his film career as well.
Yeah,
but, definitely on this film, he's ironing out some of the intricacies that you get in even some of the slicker, bigger budget wuxia films of this time from Ching So-tung and Chai Hak and really flattening some of that out in order to get much more of a Western kind of approach to the films.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair.
I mean, I think it is key, isn't it, that has like a beginning, middle and end, that has that kind of conventional narrative trajectory. Because I think so many of the kind of films of the time are very confusing. that you have to
in a nice way.
You have to kind of let go of the narrative in order to enjoy the films, which kind of is not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah. I kind of think it limits your audience in if people really can't follow it. And I think in the West we're much more, we value kind of narrative motivation, the kind of enigma, the kind of puzzle that has to be solved, or the conflict, and so we really value explanations. And I always think that's a kind of key kind of difference, especially when you're looking at films of the kind of 80s and 70s in sort of Chinese language cinemas. So I think you can kind of connect to the characters, you can connect to the romance, and I think some of the kind of adaptations of it that don't foreground the romance, actually you don't connect to them, because I think that's kind of what the film really gets right. It's a kind of relationship that you're invested in the characters and you want them to end up together. So even if it's not as fast as some of those films might be, it's a kind of characterization that keeps you going.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's sort of familiar, whether it's Chinese audiences or Western audiences, with that whole kind of like doomed romance, doomed tragic lovers thing, whether it's Romeo or Juliet or Dream of the Red Chamber or anything. It's got that very sort of universal thing, which was played upon in like trailers and artwork and stuff for it as well. Certainly in the West. So yeah, it definitely didn't come across as being something which was going to be like culturally baffling. Or narratively baffling for people, which is... And
I think because he doesn't... I mean, I think that's the thing, as I said before, I think it's kind of that idea that with the other films, there's still kind of a weight and importance to those kind of characters, whereas here he just kind of strips that back. So they're not going to be on screen for a long time. You just kind of... Really just the kind of the top level, okay, these are the two different sides. You don't have to know the hierarchy in that detail. You don't have to know the... which is, I think that's one of the kind of main things that's quite a different approach to. Yeah,
I mean it's confusing if you read Shakespeare, if you're reading Romeo and Juliet or something like that. By the time you've got those fucking Montagues and Capulets or whatever, man, you don't know who they are or forget about it. So it's whether it's the clans or that side of it. Yeah, he sort of meets somewhere in the middle and does a very good job of actually focusing the story there. But but it is. I think the other thing which is different about it, which was when I rewatched it again not long ago for the Eureka one, it's like it's in some ways I had it remembered in my mind as being more like a fantasy one, like a Zoo Warriors type one like that. I mean, obviously it's quite a long time afterwards those ones, but I think a lot of the time it still gets I don't want to say lumped in with, but it still kind of goes under that kind of like fantasy, crazy wuxia type of thing with lots of madness going on, everything like that. Whereas it's watching it again, it is like a lot more of a considered film, like a lot of sort of really visual storytelling rather than
very visual.
Not just not being plot driven, but just how little dialogue and stuff there actually is in it a lot of the time, which is good as well. I mean, that is possibly another reason.
And again, I think again that was quite deliberate.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to have the English dub of the film, that there's not actually much to dub.
It's
You
very
can have
true.
that awkward, very British accents or whatever they're using. I mean, the other part of the way it's shot as well, and I think this is something that plays into a lot of what you did, was, you know, I do feel that there's a lot of horror, there's a lot of kind of, you know, those kind of exploitation conventions that, you know, again, that's kind of, you know, in some ways it's, I mean, it wasn't, that wasn't happening in Hong Kong films, but it feels a little more, for want of a better word, kind of grounded than some of those more random things you get in a lot of other Hong Kong films.
Yeah, that's true, man. I mean, he'd done a bit of horror before in Hong Kong, running you as well. He'd done like The Trail, of course, which is
a fantastic film.
I fucking love The Trail, and The Trail's a good example, maybe that as well, because it takes some like a sort of something which is very sort of, I'm not saying it's real Chinese mythology, but you know, it takes what the films take us some like Taoist mythologies and stuff, but it's got quite a lot of Western influences. Everything, the Trail as well.
I mean, some of them very direct as well. I mean, it's like direct in that film, without going off as well, but you know, the direct references in that film to Alien, and a lovely kind of bit at the end, which is a direct reference to The Exorcist.
Yeah, and you've got even like the music and everything carefully lifted from various.
Yeah, no, I mean,
yeah. But he'd done like The Occupant as well, Chow Yun-fat, and Bless This House, which are more, you know, ghost comedy ones, but you know, oh, there we go, nice. Yeah, and he's just flashing up he's showing off his DVDs. And that was just randomly lying there as well.
Just randomly lying there.
Good films though. Good films, both, all three of those. But yeah, so he had a background. But you're right, that most of this type of film, this was one of the first ones which kind of like moved into. So if you take like Chinese Ghost Stories, say, which has still got a romance plot, that was much more on the Zoo Warriors. Wacky, again, sounds wrong, but sort of crazy fantasy. Whereas you're right, this is more grounded, if not visually, than, you know, the characters and everything about it, with horror elements rather than fantasy elements. It's
much more considered, I think, and maybe that's kind of the point to go into. The visual part of it as well. That it's, you know, I mean, yeah, famously, the cinematographer is Peter Powell, who would later win an Oscar for Crouching Tiger. You've got people like Eddie Ma, who's the art director. One of the other interesting choices is the Japanese costume designer, Emi Uwada, who
right, I didn't know that.
Who'd actually, she'd worked on Akira Kurosawa films. You know, but then after this, she did other films. I mean, I think we can talk about that in a bit as well.
Sure.
Kind of the legacy of this, but I was kind of right hand man, basically. David Wu, who was the editor. I co-wrote the script. He, I think, did some of the music editing as well. And, you know, I mean, he's definitely the real kind of one of the kind of driving forces. But it is visually, it is such a considered movie. And I think, you know, I mean, I always thought of it, for a long time. Readers of the easternKicks website when it launched back in 2002 will know that I've used the subscription for The Broad White Hair before, but I always felt like it was if Pal and Pressburger had gone off and made a Wuxian movie. It's so...
Yeah, I can dig that.
You know, I mean, there's some bits where, you know, like when the Leslie Chow character's growing up and he's being taught in the sort of autumn leaves and against the kind of almost the kind of Gone with the Wind kind of set behind it. You know, there's the way it's introduced. It's kind of weird where a lot of cinema had gone away from being very studio based and all the kind of the Shaw Brothers of the films of the 60s and 70s where they're all done in the studio. I mean, sure, not everybody had the power to have like a very big outdoor studio like the Shaw Brothers did, but there'd been a definite move outside of the studio into the 80s with the new wave Hong Kong directors. And this solidly brings it back in. So you've got the wonderful kind of introduction with Leslie Cheung at the beginning where he's on the mountaintop and you know, and it doesn't, I don't even know what he quite does, but you know, people are kind of bursting and blood's going everywhere, but he's so beautifully lit, his hair all disheveled, and I mean, it is visually it's an absolutely amazing movie. And again, you know, I think it plays into what you said before about really trying to make this not much dialogue, really kind of based on the visual parts of the story, and just make it work without there being the need for a translation in a sense. I think that's a very powerful part of the film.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is where we were chatting about this before, like pulling out some of the influences himself. I mean, he said himself, like, he was very influenced by Ridley Scott visually for the film. Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
To give it its full title.
Exactly. but he also he also said Last of the Mohicans. I mean, not so much visually, I guess, but that's an interesting one.
You can see that in the way that the Brigitte Lin clan that she's associated with is very kind of they look like a sort of indigenous tribe.
That's true. It's true.
Yeah.
I never thought about it before, but yeah.
Again, it's very much a goal to try and get this. Really to actually kind of aim for an international audience, and I think perhaps recognising something in some ways a bit more than I mean, I guess this was the point where Hong Kong directors were starting to make that crossover. Just about the time of Hard Targets was around that time.
That's true. Yeah, would be about the same.
Broken Arrow, was the other one that was kind of going about that time. I that's the start of
Yeah.
I think he was obviously aware that people in Hollywood were taking notice, and also that there was a chance to try and reach audiences. But perhaps more so with doing a Hong Kong film than some of those directors just went, oh, fine, we'll just do an American version of it. We won't worry about
with Van Damme.
With Van Damme, or John Travolta.
That's true, but what was his first? What was his first one? It was before Brigitte. First Hollywood one, yeah.
Warriors of Virtue.
That's I can remember. I did see it quite a long time after it came out. Yeah. His first English language one.
Yeah.
But then Bride of Chucky, everything like that. But he still worked with some of his usuals and everything on these films in Hollywood as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Maybe I wonder if how much control then he was given for those films actually, because his films were more. You have Bride of Chucky, like 51st Date. For better or worse, Freddy versus Jason. Personally like it a lot, but a lot of people kind of trash it because it's a nonsense film, but it's a very funny nonsense film. But his films are more consistent or coherent than a lot of the Hong Kong directors.
I would say that as well.
There.
I would say that he doesn't have those.
There's nothing awkward.
They might not kind of reach
it.
the same heights, but they don't reach the same lows either. And I think he was just.
Bride of Chucky's. Yeah, I'm not a massive fan of the Child's Play franchise, but it's
it's easily the best, isn't it? I think
a good one.
I think I always kind of question how much of that was him or him being kind of used by the writer producer to really kind of push through their vision of it.
Yeah, possibly, but either way, it turned out. It doesn't feel like you can't really call a Child's Play film compromised, I guess, but it doesn't feel like.
It feels like something else. It feels like they took it to a different place. I mean, getting Jennifer Tilly in as the bride actually just took it to a whole new level. But anyway,
yeah. But yeah. Freddy versus Jason again. It's different to the other ones kind of in the series. It has a much more of a higher energy feel. A lot more people like jumping around and doing stuff in there. So again, whatever the kind of reasons behind it, they certainly feel like films which he was involved in, rather than just kind of like ticking boxes, everything like that. So
because it's really difficult to know. Most sort of Hong Kong, Korean, Japanese directors who've gone over to kind of work in America have had very bad experiences, and kind of experiences that have been sort of defined by having very little control over what they do. Because I think Carter had a really bad experience, but then he continued. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting, isn't it, the way in which directors kind of cross over, and what they bring to those films, but also what they have to sacrifice in terms of making those films as well. So, and of course this is. I mean, when's John Woo's first Hollywood film?
Hard Target. I'm gonna 90. Are we gonna take a guess on it while we all practically double check?
1993. So it's the same year.
I was gonna say.
I cheated.
I was gonna say 92 as a guess, but
I would have thought it was that. I thought it was earlier as well. To be honest.
But yeah, right. Yeah, but as you were saying, yes, it's round. But it is that whole period where those films were going across and being reasonably successful in the States. Most of those ones as well, whether they were cinema releases like Hard Target and stuff, or some of the more direct to DVD stuff. I mean, that was a big, was a big market. At the time
direct to VHS in those days. Or Laserdisc, direct to Laserdisc.
I knew you were gonna. I knew you were gonna. That's how you've shamed yourself today, though. You held up a DVD, not a Laserdisc. No, a Laserdisc for the people at home. There we go. He's got the Laserdiscs out.
Brigitte.
So we're gonna. Oh, there's a whole bunch of them. We're gonna have to do an easternKicks video podcast, so everyone who's listening can get the full appreciation of the old Hoskins Laserdisc collection. Possibly one of the largest in the world, or the largest in Bow in East London.
Definitely the largest in Bow, I'm sure.
It seems to be kind of one of the things that kind of sets these kind of directors that coming over from sort of Hong Kong is the style, the stylism, that they bring something aesthetically different.
Yeah.
And the kind of choreography, they kind of bring that too. And in a way it kind of refreshes Hollywood sort of or US sort of action and horror films because it brings something new. And you can see those influences. So when I was thinking to Freddy versus Jason, which I haven't seen for a while, but I can remember the kind of visuals of it. So I think there was certainly, and the sort of choreography, almost a kind of dance-like choreography that it kind of brings to kind of action films which had been very kind of hard-hitting. There hadn't been a lot of subtlety, and there hadn't been a lot of planning those kind of sequences out. And certainly you didn't get that in horror, really, at all.
No, that's definitely true. I mean, away from the horror side, I mean, that's what was kind of interesting, I guess, about Hard Target and John Woo. That was produced, but Sam Raimi had produced it, and he was the one who kind of pulled John Woo over. Whereas, quite a lot of those other films were influenced by The Evil Dead, everything like that. Even just some of the camera work and everything like that. So I mean, it's nice when you see that kind of. This
appreciation,
cultural cinematic communication.
yeah.
It's not, but it's nice when you can see that kind of wider view of things like that, and that's why Ronnie Yu kind of quite nicely sits in the middle of that. I mean, another quick anecdote about Bride then, which I picked up when I was researching on this. I mean, so they did the sound post and everything in Canada as well, because they wanted to. It was the first Hong Kong to actually mix in Dolby. So then the problem was when they came back to Hong Kong, because they'd use all these Western mixing techniques. So when they brought it back to Hong Kong, a lot of the cinemas couldn't actually play the film properly. So they had to go around all the cinemas and testing it, listening through, making sure it actually sounded okay. And he'd said that was specifically because they wanted this sort of sound level, which people around the world were used to listening to, not just like Hong Kong audiences. So he's clearly always, he's had an eye on that kind of international audience for the film, rather than just either a local one or kind of a fan audience in Western countries, which is quite interesting. And you can definitely see all of this.
啱夠碌。你究竟係咩人？點解要跟住我？
我係做人同我哋冇仇，點解一定要殺晒佢哋？唔好打！你而家黐線㗎，敵我不分。
So let's chat about the cast then. I mean, it is the magical kind of combination with of Brigitte Lin and Leslie Cheung, who surprisingly didn't work together. Out of all the kind of Hong Kong stars, they didn't work together that much apart from this film. So you've got Ashes of Time, which was ongoing, thanks to Wong being completely so ongoing that he went off and did Chungking Express. And also produced Jeffrey Lau doing
Eagle Shooting Heroes.
Shooting Heroes, yeah. And, so this was one of those rare occasions where they were... And I think one of the strengths of this is that they were cast to their strengths. I think one of the great things about this is that they were cast to their strengths, that both of them are playing against, gender stereotypes. You've got Brigitte Lynn, who's the very kind of aggressive, if you like, masculine kind of role. She doesn't really listen to anyone. She's just straight in there. She's not one for talking. And then Leslie Cheung is the sensitive guy who's kind of like, hey, I'm brought up as a fighter, but it's not really what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what comes across on screen. Is and part of why we buy into this. Before we were we were just kind of doing the test recording. We're talking about there is a special chemistry going on here that and I think that you don't get as much in maybe in films anywhere, but at this era of Hong Kong film where you've and earlier where you've got the chemistry between Brigitte and Leslie that just works so well.
Yeah, absolutely. They're fantastic in the film. It was kind of coming at a interesting point in both their careers. For Leslie Cheung, as you're saying, like kind of playing against type, but it was more in that kind of early 90s where he was becoming more comfortable, I guess, with properly playing those kind of roles and everything. He'd been working with like Wong Kar-wai. He had that brief weird not fake, but retirement thing where he moved to Canada at the end of the 80s, and then that didn't last very long. And then he was doing like Wong Kar-wai, like Days and Being Wild, like obviously like the ongoing Ashes of Time and everything. But this was the kind of time where he was kind of more embracing that kind of non-traditional macho persona in films, like also in like Farewell My Concubine around about 93 as well. So it's got a fantastic balance.
He's a woman, she's a man as well. So
that's right.
So
he was getting into all those different kinds of films around then, and then matching him with Brigitte Lynn in that kind of later stages of her career, because she didn't really do too much after.
Well,
after
the thing is, so you had when Ashes of Time finally came out, and there was a few more films, and then she did what was then the very classic thing of marrying and retiring.
That's right. Yeah.
With only a couple of voiceover roles, I think. Since
that's true. There wasn't. There's not been much at all. So it was an interesting time in their careers, and so for her playing that kind of strong, she was coming off stuff like Swordsman 2 and everything like that. So it was just a perfect match getting those two. I mean they're both fantastic performers who had a huge amount of like screen charisma as well. And as you say, like then with roles kind of like designed around them, everything. Yeah, it's just lightning striking. Everything happening like that.
No, and you don't usually in kind of film which has this kind of gothic fantasy element traditionally get actors who are at this kind of stage in their careers. They're both kind of coming towards the end of their careers for kind of different reasons, but they're both sort of great actors and actresses that they kind of at their kind of best, I think. And I do think, I kind of think that if Leslie Cheung had not sort of decided that things were too hard, and if Brigitte Lynn had kind of stuck around, I think they would have been one of those enduring star couples that you kind of because in the few films they're in together, they sort of, I think they kind of complement each other. The kind of sort of masculinity in Brigitte Lynn complements the femininity in Leslie Cheung without them being less of a man or less than a woman. And I kind of think it's very, and you don't, Hong Kong cinema does explore that, and therefore there are ways in which those kind of gender roles are less, I don't know, I kind of think that outside of cinema and outside of the performances, I think the situation was quite different, and I think Leslie Cheung had a very difficult time. I think that they light the screen up, and you totally believe in their romance. You believe in, you invest in this because there's something so, I don't know, it's transcendent. I can't think of very many, you have to go back to old Hollywood to see this kind of stardom, to see that kind of you know.
I think the kind of doomed romance part of it
Yeah.
sort of ties into it as well. It's not like a, what would you say, sort of rom-com, lovey-dovey kind of traditional romance type thing. Everything is very pained. It's pretty angsty and everything like that. Both the characters are obviously, troubled for their own reasons. Everything. So I
mean, I like what you're saying there, because I could easily imagine that a year or two down the line, if Brigitte Lin had stayed acting, there being, them being in a more of a rom-com in a sort of Katharine Hepburn versus Cary Grant kind of a way, because they had those kind of, and I think that's something that's quite true of a lot of the Hong Kong stars of the 80s, is that they, and it was a very studio-based system, and therefore what you got out of it from the 70s and 80s, from the 60s onward, but from the 70s and 80s, is you get these stars like Brigitte, and like Leslie, who are completely out of golden era Hollywood. They are, they have that kind of, as you say, kind of transcendent kind of like, it's a whole other level of stardom, and they're just kind of professionality, and just is in their DNA really. It's something else again. It's not people throwing phones at poor members of staff and stuff.
No. And of course, Brigitte Lin had been in over 100 films by the time she got to this, so she was incredibly, even though she was quite young when she retired, she had worked, like, if you talk about like the studio system, that's how actors
For about 17, 18 years old.
Yeah.
And also, being lucky enough to actually kind of interview her in person, and she really doesn't look any older than she did in Chungking Express. It's kind of amazing. She really, really enjoyed the process of filmmaking. The just respect, the working with directors. I kind of always saw it as kind of a, the way she kind of put it as being like another family to her in a sense. And so, and they're everyone's trying to keep to a, okay, well, it's time to pack up. And she's like, no, we can finish this scene. I don't mind. I don't want to go home now. Let's carry on shooting the film.
这个角色是可以说是比较野性的，算是跟其他电影是有不一样的。
Well, this particular character, as you said earlier, she's aggressive, so she is the wild one, and it's very different from all the other roles she has played. This is the one that has a romance in the story.
That's Brigitte Lin herself, translated by a previous guest to the program, Sophia Wong Boccio of Asian Pop-Up Cinema.
他们有一个镜头是两个在水里面，在水那个湖水其实是蛮脏的。
So there was a particular scene that they were floating in the water. Now she remembered the water was not clean at all.
水里面冒出来，要拍一些很亲热的。 激情的戏
So she said, they both characters in that particular scene was they have to sort of pop up from the water, and they have to be in a very sexual, intimate scene. And she said she appreciated that Leslie gave her a lot of hints, the tips how to do that, and they were also good friends. So they immediately get into the mood of that particular scene.
有一次我在化妆间。 在化妆间，那导演跟那个皮特包两个人把所有化妆间的人赶出去。那我觉得很奇怪，他们为什么那么神秘啊？把他们赶出去。
So actually, she was approached by the director and Peter Pao, the cinematographer, DOP. One day they said they want to have a private conversation with her in the dressing room, and kick everybody out of the room. And they asked her particularly. That whether she's interested to have a little bit of nudity in that water, scene. At that point, she said, no, I'm not going to do it. But when they actually get into the shot, she was so into it. She said, I totally forgot what I said, yes or no.
And she was a very, very strong woman, so she didn't. She managed to evade the kind of things that happen quite often in cinema with women actresses, sort of before that and at the time. You know, she
I think it's
talked
very
about
interesting.
that.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, she was quite, because this was back when she was at Udine a few years ago, and she did say, you know, that part of that was because of her age. So being so young when she got into the business, but you know, by the time, you know, it was the early 70s from Taiwan, and then coming to Hong Kong, she's got, you know, a good 5-10 years on a lot of the up and coming stars of Hong Kong cinema in the early 80s, you know. And I think I always feel like it's a combination. So you've got on the one side, she's quite commanding. She has that sort of power in terms of choosing the right roles for her career and the stuff that's interesting. But also, I think with particularly with the directors from the new wave and that were coming out of the new wave kind of ideals, which as a kind of as a bit of an outsider, kind of includes Ronnie Yeo as well.
Yeah.
You know, as they looked to her as a strong character. They were looking for nice. There seemed to be this desire to find strong female roles, which comes from the sort of 60s Cheng Pei Pei, you know, and Angela Mao kind of icons. But then it 70s, bless him, you know, Chang Cheh invents this kind of macho cinema in Hong Kong. And then, you know, Chai Hark and so on are really massively intent on bringing it back. And she is just like, she's the role model for those characters of being, no, she's not going to take any shit from anyone. She's not the fawning damsel in distress. She's always the strong character who's just coming in and kicking everybody's asses, basically. And I think, you know, that's one of the, you know, I suppose she's one of the great icons of Hong Kong cinema, is because, you know, they were looking for someone and she was it, basically. But she was also in a position where she could pick those roles and play them beautifully as well. You know, she had that experience. We can't talk about the cast without talking about Francis and Elaine Lau as the conjoined twins of the evil cult.
Yeah, it's an interesting villains, I guess. But I guess. I mean,
it's beautifully.
It is, yeah.
They're camply played by the pair of them.
But it works. It's one of those things that kind of maybe shouldn't work, but it actually works very well. Even the voices and everything, I remember. But I guess maybe that kind of partly ties. You know, we were just talking about like the sort of films take on, like, if you say gender politics and everything like that, with the sort of reversals of macho female roles, everything. It's an odd way to kind of visualize some kind of conflict in there through those, but it works, and partly because I mean, Elaine didn't do too many films, everything, but Francis, you know, he's still quite early in his career, I guess, because he didn't really take off till like the late 80s, give or take. But he was mid-90s? By taking off, I think I would say just when you get into that Hong Kong pattern of making at least 5 films a year. So that was kind of like late 80s, like 88, something like that, when he started doing that. I mean, it was probably not until the mid 90s where he started getting really recognized and noticed. But this was kind of at the start where he was properly in that sort of mode of doing lots of films, like because he also was in like Flirting Scholar the same year and Kung Fu Cult Master. And it's a Wong Jing classic. Jet Li, Sammo, and unsurprisingly, Ching Mi Yao. You know, big surprise for her appearing in an early 90s Wong Jing film. But he's great in that. And it's an odd role, everything like that, to have taken on.
I mean, I think, you know, I mean, it speaks to, you know, and personally, that's what I love about Francis the most, is that, you know, he throws himself into these, you know, camp, you know, they can be quite funny roles, you know, in a sense, but just absolutely embraces it completely, you know, there's
definitely.
You know, he's always there, 120%.
But I think that's one of the. But like you're saying, he throws himself in, but he was never, for better or worse, I don't know what he'd say about it, but as you know, looking at some his films, everything, he was never kind of shackled to that kind of leading man status.
It's quite interesting, actually.
You know, so
but it's one of those things where is that just the way that the cookies fell, or whatever the expression is, or is that just him?
Yeah.
Going for those roles.
It would be, absolutely. It'd be interesting to know more about it. But
it's not like he doesn't have the looks, you know. He's a good-looking bloke.
He's pretty debonair,
the rom-com lead, but he never really.
But he
never really kind of did much in that.
No, but even in like action films and stuff like that, you know, or horror films or all this stuff he's in. Even when he like turned into a bit of like filmmaking stuff, it was quite, you know, left field type of stuff. So he's very interesting guy. But yeah, I mean, great great villains in there and everything like that. And this is probably one of the reasons maybe why I kind of remember it being a wackier film than it actually is. Is because of them, because it does stand out, not in a bad way, but compared to other more grounded aspects of the film, as we've said, and everything. But yeah, it works. You got strong cast members there, but
I mean, you got a lot of decent supporting cast as well. I mean, it's going to Eddie Coe, good old Eddie Coe from
yes.
Well, who's probably best known as the guy that saves Matt Damon from
That's right.
in The Martian. Now,
he's in The Martian, of course. He was in The Postman Strikes Back though as well. He's worked with Ronnie Yu before everything, so I guess they were known to each other everything. But he was in Lethal Weapon 4 as well. So he kind of bounced. He did. I've got a feeling he was based in Canada at the same time. So maybe that sort of ties into it. But you've also got Jeffrey Lau turning up in there. You know, him, the classic Mortuary Blues, Haunted Cop Shop 2, Thunder Cops 2, Chinese Odyssey. You know, so it's got a very good cast of sort of quite recognisable Hong Kong sort of genre players from the time, which, if you're doing this kind of thing where you've got background characters who are not in it for very long and you're not overcomplicating the plot, then having those kind of actors playing them is definitely a big benefit to a film like this, because you don't really need to overcomplicate it if you can see someone you recognise.
So, I mean, we're going to kind of wrap up talking about The Bride with White Hair directly. I mean, is there anything else you guys want to kind of...
No, I think we've been pretty comprehensive. I mean,
I think one of the things that did come up when I was looking at this was that someone who'd written about it says that it's actually also can be seen as a version of a 1943 story called The White-Haired Girl, which was a theatrical play, and was and the character of the wolf girl is in this kind of, which becomes a theatre play and becomes a ballet, and was kind of a communist revolutionary play.
Okay.
So it's quite interesting because the writer talks about Brigitte Lin doesn't talk about the film in the light of it being an adaptation, but talks about it as being related to this, and Brigitte Lin's character therefore related to the wolf girl that you do have in the film. So I thought that was quite interesting, because it kind of says that the film's kind of sort of a subversion of that kind of communist ideology that you had in that kind of story of really a girl that's rescued, whereas you don't, Brigitte Lin here is the doesn't need to be rescued.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably a discussion to be had there about the origins of the story, of the original story, then, isn't there?
Well, it ties into old Confucian ideals and whatnot and everything. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's interesting because obviously, inspiration comes from quite a lot of different places. So that, what has that sort of Romeo and Juliet, it also has those kind of, and of course in Chinese cinema, women were, if we're talking about sort of Chinese cinema, sort of pre the split, women were in very, were protagonists. They were in the main roles. They were, during the Communist Revolution, women were, not seen just as mothers or daughters, but they were seen as warriors as well. So I think there's kind of that tradition that this kind of looks back to as well.
Yeah, it's a good point. It would be interesting to kind of dive into that kind of influence on the source material for this, and probably which would be source material for like a bunch of other films as well, like a lot of those different writers in that kind of period, everything. Because there's no way they weren't getting influenced by those kind of, specifically that kind of new CCC movements and stuff like that. Everything.
Definitely. So with Bride with White Hair, I mean, let's kind of look at what happened next. So it was amazing. It was a massive success, and it did make real kind of waves internationally. So then we very quickly got the sequel, The Bride with White Hair 2.
It was 1993 as well, technically, I believe.
It was right at the end of 1993. So I mean, there's a couple of things I find quite interesting. I mean, one of them is, they're both kind of connected, but what is quite interesting is that it seems to be really trying hard to introduce a new generation of Hong Kong talent, which it doesn't do a great job of, and most of them don't really go on to do much. So, you particularly you've got Christy Cheng in there, who was in a few films about this time, but then her career didn't really massively do much. And you've got some other people there who go on and do a little, but it does feel like they were trying to introduce a new direction. And as part of that, I think what's quite interesting is to look at some of the newer versions of some of these Hong Kong classics that are turning up on the streaming sites in China. Yeah, talking about those, I mean, it does seem to be one from this year of which is going under the title of White-Haired Devil Lady or whatever. But, again, it's under its original title is the original title of the work. We've had, with the revisions that started at the beginning of the decade, the new version of a Chinese ghost story,
Chinese fairy story.
There was a new version.
So it seems to be referred. Most of the things I read about seems to be a Chinese fairy story now.
Yeah.
Well, which is new one on me, but that's what it seems to be referred to everywhere now. But
there was a version of Chai Hart did a version of Legend of Zoo as well, and then it just kind of kicked off a few. So we had the white-haired witch of Lunar Kingdom in 2014.
Yeah, we did.
Which just lacked that kind of chemistry between the stars, and kind of it felt a bit awkward in terms of trying to do maybe a bit more of the story, but then trying to kind of play up to the romance of definitely trying to play into the romance of the Bride with White Hair.
For sure, but then it's miscast completely. It's just, I mean, for everything we've said about, Bride of White Hair, as well as like the great direction, everything as we said, it's like the insanely good casting and acting. For this one, it's like the opposite, because Jacob Chung, he's not a bad director. He can do blockbusters. Even if you take Bride of White Hair and you can up the pointless battle scene action content and everything, like it still has at its center a sappy love story. And Fan Bing's okay. She's never been a bad actress. She just makes a lot of stupid choices. But then you have like Huang Xiaoming, who's again not a bad actor. But he's dreadful in this. He looks like he doesn't want to be there. Anytime he's kind of holding it, it's almost like at arm's length, like get away from me, woman. I'm not particularly bothered about being here today. It's not massively his fault. The character's kind of written that way. He's not massively interested in her. In the film, so then to suddenly switch into love stuff doesn't work.
She has to sacrifice herself for him. So it has that kind of everything that kind of the original wasn't. So I'm going to sacrifice my kind. I'm going to forget you in order to, in order to save you, if you like. But then we'll be back together
even though he
again
doesn't care.
Kind of like the next life. But it's not like Rouge where you want them to be together again. You just don't care.
It's a bad ending for him as well. He's like, we'll be together in the next life. He's like, oh God, I just want to go away and conquer some ethnic tribes.
And then I remember James, you telling me about how you felt, but then it ends with the classic theme tune from The Bride with White Hair. Making the whole connection between the two. Whereas you could have kind of gone, okay, well, it's not the same film, so forget it.
But then we're gonna stamp it home and everything.
這一生，願這一晚，誰信愛是這樣難，恨愛之間分不散，紅顏白髮更覺璀璨。
And everything. It's such an awkward film. It feels almost like if they'd made it 10 years earlier, 10 years later, it would have been probably better. Or, more watchable. If they'd made it now, everything, it would still be... I think it would be more honest about what kind of film it was, just like a cash grab type thing. Yeah. Whereas this one, as you say, it kind of had the gall to try and, tie itself into the original, which was even just a mistake. It's not a terrible film, but it's even worse for not being that bad. It's just such a classic averager. For me, in terms of legacy,
The Phantom Lover is better legacy.
Was that a DVD or was that a Laserdisc?
Well, that was a DVD, but I do have that on the Laserdisc as well. See, it's good old Leslie there again.
It's nice.
I mean, like we were saying. I mean, we already kind of touched on this with the like that was pretty much the whole creative of the Bro with White Hair.
Yeah.
Moving on and doing the Phantom Lover and doing Leslie Cheung, not with Brigitte because she's retired, but it's as I remember it, it's more of a musical, but it very very gothic. I think really in some ways it's kind of a bit underrated. But again, it's a very beautiful looking film.
But I mean, Phantom Lover, I think, but it was in Mandarin, right? It wasn't a Hong Kong film technically. I think it was a mainland film. If I'm wrong, you can cut. If I'm wrong, you can cut this bit out.
Because I remember there were kind of problems with the kind of romantic elements of it, so they had to mute.
Yes, exactly. That's why I remember that, because I spent a while trying to get the DVD from it before, and then I remember being confused why it was. It was from another old DDD house one back in the day, and I remember being confused as why is Mandarin the top track. You could get like a
soundtrack,
you get like a
which is
Cantonese one, but
yeah.
So it's it coming only like a couple of years after, or however long it was, from Bride of White Hair. I mean, it's it seems like a stab at taking elements from it again, sort of the sort of doomed love story type stuff, more for the kind of the mainland market kind of at that point. I mean, this was before the mainland market was massively taking over, but. At the same time, it seems to like take different elements from different things, but package it kind of into. I mean, successfully. It's still a very cool film. Everything. I mean,
it's quite interesting. Again, I think in some ways, was kind of underrated for this, but kind of recognizing that there was maybe wasn't at that point, but there would be an audience there and trying to exploit it a bit more. Again, he's kind of ahead of the curve.
Absolutely, totally, and maybe that's why it isn't as oft mentioned as some of his other stuff, because it's not like 100%, because it's not like a Hong Kong film, even though it has the cast and everything. So maybe that is part of it. And 5 years later, 10 years later.
And Leslie Cheung had a lot to do with it. I mean, he was involved in the score and everything. So I think that he's. I mean, I've seen him being interviewed about it, and he had quite a lot of impact. It's sort of a lot of.
Okay.
Yeah. He was involved a great deal. I mean, and one of the things about Leslie Cheung is people don't kind of sometimes realise that, he wasn't just an actor, he was a singer, he was a composer. He was incredibly multi-talented. And I think in The Phantom Lover, all those kind of things came together, and we kind of get a hint of, what it would have been if he had been able to make more films. But he was very, very... and this is... It's a remake of a film called A Song at Midnight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a great movie, definitely worth checking out as well.
Then you've got The Forbidden Kingdom.
Well, let's talk about the legacy of there is the white-haired character in The Forbidden Kingdom. I think, fine. Easily not the worst Jackie Chan Western Hollywood film. But then that's not saying much.
Or from anywhere where Jackie Chan.
It interested me that again, it's one of these things that kind of got far enough to be kind of brought into what is, a Western take really on all those kind of Wuxia influences. That was co-production, I believe, but I think it's, in terms of the legacy of Bride of White Hair, I mean, there's a lot coming out of the crew that made the film. You've got, as we said, Peter Powell would win an Oscar. Coming back to Emi Wada, and I wasn't really aware of this, but she went on and she did Storm Riders, she did Hero, and House of Flying Daggers. So she had quite a career, and she's still working. Working on both Japanese movies and a lot of movies in Hong Kong. Yeah, but also I kind of looking back on what she'd done, which is like I said, it's really kind of hyper stylistic look at Asian, but not just Japanese or Chinese, but you kind of, I feel like some of that kind of came into the costume design in, again, damning with faint praise, The Phantom Menace.
Oh my God, yeah.
But that very hyper stylized Asian look, which is not quite It's not quite Japanese. It's not quite. But you kind of look at the costume design there and compare that with like some of Brigitte Lin's characters and also the Francis and Elaine Lau characters, and what happens there is, I feel like there's quite an influence, and also you definitely see her influence over when there was the resurgence of wuxia in the noughties, and it was moving to the mainland. It's not very grounded anymore. That becomes extremely stylized in terms of what these costumes would have looked like, and that's carried all the way through. I think now it's become this new language, which isn't. People are trying very hard not to do the sort of 70s and 80s style of kind of costume design, which was not, there wasn't much to it. It's trying to make it kind of, I guess, a bit more kind of a cinematic impact. But there's so much in there and in the details. And I guess you've also got the fantasy Lord of the Rings kind of style of stuff as well. But trying to make that kind of same impact in terms of the costume design. I don't really remember it happened to this degree before The Bride with White Hair, and definitely kind of into the noughties. And she's one of the main people. So I actually quite a strong legacy there.
And I kind of think one of the legacies of the film is that it was one of the few films that brought Leslie Cheung and Brigitte Lin together, and I kind of think it has a place in history separate to the genre, in that you have these kind of two stars. And I think the only other film they were in after this, besides the sequel, was Ashes of Time, which was kind of the final film. So I kind of think it also is a fitting legacy of those two actors who were at their peak in the film. So I think it's a legacy in terms of genre, in terms of people worked on, in terms of Hong Kong cinema, but also in terms of the kind of actors and actresses who were in that, for whom it's kind of film that won't be forgotten for lots of different reasons. And I think it's part of Leslie Cheung's legacy. I think it's a very important part of his legacy.
點解你咁做啊？
The Bride with White Hair is available from Eureka as part of their Eureka Classics collection. It has a whole host of extras on there with interviews and audio commentaries.
Hi, I'm Fan from China, and I'm part of this Udine FEFF campus this year. The film that I want to talk about is Dance With Me. Why do some people like to watch musicals? Wonders Shizuka, a discreet, camped, and industrious Japanese office lady working at a well-established financial company in Tokyo. She exudes the air of professionalism and cautiousness typical of the Japanese salaryman, and seems the least likely to let herself loose. Isn't it nutty that the musical actors swing their bodies and belt out songs out of the blue? She reasons. However, after getting tranced into believing that she was born a diva by a charlatan hypnotist, Shizuka cannot help but turn into boisterous, assertive, untamable musical lead dancing to the beat. In order to break the spell and revert back to her normal life, Shizuka needs to chase down the hypnotist, and thus has many strange yet hilarious encounters on a wild road trip through the Japanese countryside. A breezy blend of musical road trip and comedy, Dance With Me depicts the story of a woman discovering her talent for musicals which she initially abhors. Director Shinobu Yaguchi conceived the idea after seeing many foreign musicals. As he pointed out in a recent interview, Japanese audiences generally find bursting into song and dance very strange, and by making this film he hoped to cross this barrier. However, Yaguchi believes that he is tweaking typical musicals by giving Dance With Me an anti-musical element. Instead of smoothing the plot or helping to reveal the innermost feelings and thoughts of the leads, the musical parts often want trouble and could leave, the audiences wondering if they are indeed watching a musical at all. On a scale of 0 to 5, I would give Dance With Me 3 stars for the satisfactory acting alone. The sheer enthusiasm and liveliness lead Miyoshi radiates when Shizuka loses herself in dance is contagious, and at points it may even make you want to sing along. However, speaking from experiences as a connoisseur of stage musicals and those of Hollywood and Bollywood, I would say the plot is loose and could have been more spiced up. Sure, the film is intended to be funny and lighthearted, but that should not come at the cost of not fully exploring the relationship tensions. For example, Shizuka seems to have nurtured a crush on a charismatic male superior who uses his charms to have the female clerks work on extra tasks, but in the end she gets over these feelings. The plot could be significantly more hilarious, at least for me, if the superior was, say, teased by Shizuka dancing around him and pulling off his pretensions. Yet the actual film only brushes off the problem by having Shizuka turn down a job promotion. In addition, the symbiotic relationship between the elderly hypnotist and his middle-aged female accomplice deserves closer examination. In the film, they con people into paying for their non-existent hypnotizing magic. But it would be fun to see how this rare success on Shizuka makes them legitimate hypnotists, able to peddle their tricks and enjoy a greater extent of fame. Unsure of whether to accept her job promotion despite not finding genuine passion in it, Shizuka can confidently walk away from the winner's career path at the end of the film, knowing that she has discovered, proven, and inalienable talent for musicals. This might be the biggest takeaway apart from the much-needed stress-relieving laughter the film surely provides. Personally, it presents a cheerful, though unlikely, alternative to the monotonous, depressing office life of forever being confined in a cubicle and tempered by corporate rules. Just like Shizuka, people might have some undiscovered talent and unkindled passion. Hypnotize yourself, be open to suggestions, and you might just stumble upon your real gift.
So now let's head on over to easternKicks picks. This is stuff that is either recent releases or discoveries that we've just fallen over while searching for something completely different on Amazon or Netflix or various other streaming services.
But this, of course, comes with the usual disclaimer as correct at time of recording. So it might not be true tomorrow.
Or even in 5 minutes.
But there's quite a lot more stuff at the moment. I mean, probably because of the double gut punch of having been in lockdown for obviously most of the part of the year. So we reduced content and then less things being made internationally as well. So it makes sense. I actually thought we'd have seen even more, Asian content being hoovered up, to be honest with you. But we are seeing more stuff kind of appear at the moment. I mean, starting with Netflix, we've had a few ones recently appearing, like the Japanese film Mother was kind of dropped on there recently, which it's high up on my list to watch or anything, but I haven't got into it yet. But it seems like another sort of dark domestic type drama about mother and son crime type of thing. So it sounds great. I've heard it's pretty good, so I'm definitely going to give it a go. Girls' Revenge, a Taiwanese film, which it's very short as well, less than an hour and a half. So it's kind of a schoolgirl revenge type thing, but not really a massively revengey type revenge thing. But the review's up on easternKicks, so probably best just to head over there, head over to easternKicks and check it out. But yeah, there's a Korean sort of horror thriller one, The Call, landing in a couple of days' time, which I'm looking forward to checking out. I know I've come across a couple of other ones on Netflix recently, like A Son, the Taiwanese film just selected for the Oscars is on there. Yeah. And I didn't know A Land Imagined was on Netflix, the Singaporean one as well. So we're getting more stuff on there. But a question, Colette, I don't know if you can answer this one. Like I saw Detention from Taiwan is coming, but it seems to be a series and not the film. So I just wondering, because I know like a lot more about this. Yeah. So I was slightly confused. I don't know, because Netflix, to be honest, it does make a lot of mistakes before a film goes live.
But so it probably is. I mean, there's been lots of series made of kind of films. No, it's definitely. Okay. Well, I don't know. It says So it says new episode coming on the 5th of December.
Yes, exactly.
And it
yeah.
says TV programs based on books, Taiwanese TV programs.
Okay, because it certainly seems to be the same source material and stuff. But you know, I don't know if that's a Netflix blip or if it's like you say, if it's common that they actually have series from the same source material, or maybe a tie-in or follow-on from the film. I'm not sure.
It might be. It's difficult to know until kind of things drop. It looks. I mean, I have to say, from the first couple of minutes, it does look good.
Okay.
This is where we lose Colette while she watches.
This is we have a vague recommendation. We've confirmed it's a series, and it looks pretty good.
I mean, I do sometimes with these things because I think kind of Amazon's a bit worse for the quality of some of the stuff that gets uploaded.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh God, yes,
100%.
So I tend to really have a look at some of this stuff before I start watching it. I mean, I kind of think the Chinese, Taiwanese, there's a lot of kind of Thai stuff at the moment. A lot of Thai stuff on kind of Amazon, but.
Well, I mean, some of the stuff I found on Amazon. I mean, there seems to be like a bunch of these internet films, which I assume is probably some kind of partnership, because I don't know why you'd bother otherwise. But you know, you've got like Haunted Dormitory, Marionette Teacher, Haunted Dormitory, White Paper Girl, Haunted Cinema 2, Haunted Graduation Photo, Insect Master. I mean, I don't know. They sound intriguing enough, but. On the same, and they're all like full quality. On the other side, I found stuff like recently, Wicked Ghost 3: The Possession, which is a great it's a very enjoyable, not great film from Hong Kong, which has Ring artwork on the DVD cover. But yeah, like you're saying, you look at that. That's a DVD. That's. I mean, it's not that I expect somebody to remaster. Well, maybe I could. That would be a nice project. Remaster the Wicked Ghost trilogy for all the fans out there. But. This is just a DVD up there, and stuff like Shiver is up there for like £2 to watch now, and everything. And from everything about it just looks like somebody's uploaded a DVD. Whether or not they're going to actually make much money from that, it's another question entirely. but even stuff like we touched on, like the Enchanting Phantom before. You know, the Chinese ghost story Aichi one, that's up there now on Amazon properly. So there's a lot more of this stuff kind of leaking through, and I'd be really interested to know. If this is like some kind of partnership or deal where, you know, finally some of these internet platforms are working with someone like Amazon, whether it's selling stuff to push it out there. Because I mean, I don't see why they wouldn't. I mean, it makes sense, but I've not read anything about it.
I mean, there is a demand. You can kind of see by the way in which there's kind of restorations and that there is a demand for these kind of films. And I mean, I kind of think that, you know, Hong Kong film, I always, in terms of kind of like horror film, but for me it's kind of Italian film in the 70s. That's where it is, kind of 60s, 70s, and then it's kind of Hong Kong as the places that are the most kind of original and innovative, and I think add the most to the genre. And I think there's links between kind of, Italy and kind of Hong Kong, but I think there's kind of renewed interest, and I think certainly at the moment we're all watching a lot more stuff than we would have done, and you can see that the demand has grown. I mean, it's obviously. I mean, Netflix.
Demand has grown and the content hasn't. You know, I mean, we talked about this in our last podcast when we did the Halloween special. But you know, there is an opportunity here for there to be a lot more for people like Netflix and Amazon, and there do seem to be a lot. You know, probably not a really great idea, but there do seem some more platforms popping up as well. But for them to be picking up content, because there's still going to be a big gap between new content actually coming in from a lot of places, you know, particularly in the West.
Sure, and also even just for
Europe and the West.
If you're, you know, there's a fair Chinese audience in the UK and stuff like, and accessing like and watching stuff on like Aichi, Yoku and stuff. It's not really easy to do in the UK. You know, you'll get a bad connection, or you have to VPN it and stuff. So if the stuff was just on Amazon, and you could still watch it in the same way. You
now can. I've subscribed to IQIYI. They now do a subscription in the UK.
Oh, really? That's nice. I didn't know.
Yeah, so I've subscribed to them.
Wow. Okay.
Because I wanted to see a drama program called The Bad Kids, which has got really good reviews.
Sure.
And it's on here, and it was £5. I think £5 a month for without adverts. So yeah, somebody said something on Twitter and. Because I didn't know it was available.
No,
it is available now. So you've actually got a site that you can have much more access to some of the Chinese dramas and Chinese films.
That's very cool. With fully subtitles, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
I had no idea about that. Well, that's okay. Well, that blows what I just said out the water. Then, not much point for Amazon. There we go. But on a personal level, that's good to know. I would like to check out Dead Kids in particular. But it's for films as well, eh?
Yeah.
Ah, that's nice. Okay.
So that's it for now. Thanks to Colette for joining us on this episode.
Thank you for asking me.
No problem at all. We'll be on future ones. Don't forget you can find all of our previous episodes on Apple, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google, or wherever you go to get your podcasts. Subscribe now and you'll never miss an episode. But for now, time to say goodbye and cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.